National Soccer Network, episode 77 of Inside the Game. Welcome in, everybody. Nate Wangler with you, actually flying solo for this one here today. I know Peter is normally the one that drops in on our show and lets us know what number, what famous athlete that actually represents throughout the history of sports, really across all sports. Peter's normally the one to drop in. But beat you to the punch a little bit here, Peter. I know it's only, 8:58? So we're actually starting a little bit earlier today for episode 77. JT is on a plane somewhere to San Diego, not just somewhere. He's actually going to the West Coast. He didn't just run away. But it is our Luka Doncic episode, number 77. It's a good pull today. And I think it's ironic because we actually traded JT, believe it or not. JT's gone. He's out of here. So we actually traded for traded for a young superstar. Actually, no, JT is the young superstar. So we traded him away. We're actually the Dallas Mavericks in this situation. So JT's going to the West Coast. I'm sure he'll return at some point, and it will be met by a mix of cheers and boos. But yeah, he's gone. He's out of here. No, I'm just kidding. But that still is one of the most mind-boggling trades I can ever remember. So with that, with the mixed feelings that might come from that, welcome in to our Luka Doncic episode. We got a big show for you here today. I wanted to thank first and foremost Victoria Quay for joining us yesterday, one of our social media directors here at NSN. Former retired professional soccer player, played over in Spain, and obviously played collegiately at Cal State Northridge. And the one thing I'll say to start off this show, even as someone in sports media, I think it is really important to acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, it's okay to say you're wrong every now and again. The one thing I respect about people in sports media, Peter, what's up, my man? I beat you to the punch on that, all right? you gotta come prepared next time. I like how you're on top of it though. 8:58. Always our most loyal listener in this already. Appreciate all of you joining us, by the way. Give us a like, a follow, go ahead and subscribe. The one thing I think that's great though from anyone in sports media, if you can do it, is the willingness to admit when you're wrong. And to apologize when you're wrong. And to show people that I got it wrong. There have been bad takes in the history of sports, really, really bad takes. But the truth is that you can't survive in this area of the sports world without having strong takes. No one cares. No one's going to click on your videos. No one's going to watch your stuff. Okay? And so it's always important to be open to apologizing and admitting that you're wrong when you're wrong. The other thing that I'll say is that fake it until you make it only goes so far. But I respect the hell out of the people who excel at it. Okay? Stephen A. Smith is probably the prime example. He's on every TV you look at everywhere. Any sports, anything that you watch, he's probably there screaming at you between him and Mad Dog. I don't know if Mad Dog has it quite as deep of a bag as Stephen A. Smith does, especially when it comes to yelling at the screen and getting a reaction. But that's who he is. Okay, whether you like it or not, especially with all the LBJ stuff going on right now and him approaching him at the game and all the drama, he clearly knows how to get himself involved in that stuff. And the one thing that I'll say is that you can plug and place him anywhere, and ESPN does. And he fakes it until he makes it. He pretends that he understands what's going on. You can put him in an MMA. You could probably put him in soccer. You could probably put him in our world, and he would still be on here yelling and sounding more convincing than people who actually know the game. Okay, but having the willingness to admit, fake it until you make it only goes so far, is a really powerful thing. And that's where our job comes in. Okay, so we had the opportunity to talk to Victoria Quay yesterday about growing up over on the West Coast. And the truth is that the soccer world in the United States, because it is such a big country, is fragmented. In the Midwest, it's different than what it is down south. It's different down south than what it is maybe in the middle of the country. Okay? And it's different on the West Coast, especially when you're talking about Southern California, than it is anywhere else around the United States. And with Victoria having grown up in that environment and coming up through the youth game and having to deal with scouting and recruiting and being noticed at 7 years old. By the way, that's still asinine to me. 7 years old when they started scouting her. coming up through the system, going to college, playing professionally, all those things. She was in a position very early on to where there was one option and one option only, and that was play the game at a high level. And that's what the game comes with. That's a pressure that the game comes with when you talk about that area of the country. And it's no surprise to me that the soccer culture is as big as it is. That's a hotbed when you talk about recruiting talent in the U.S. But a lot of our best talent comes from around the world, but Victoria gave us that insight into what it's like coming up through the system in the United States. It is pay to play. A lot of it is. A lot of the system is broken. But I think her story will help kind of feed a lot of what it is that we're trying to do on this podcast, which, again, take you inside the game. So if you want to check out that full interview, again, big thank you to her. Go on our YouTube page, episode 76 with Victoria Quay. We also got a stacked lineup coming up here today. There's this mentality in sports that titles are everything. Titles are absolutely everything. And if you don't win one, it doesn't matter how great of an individual athlete you were. It doesn't matter how great of an individual coach you were. A lot of times your legacy will be judged on that. A lot of times people will mention that in conversations when they talk about your greatness. Who exactly is it that's the greatest in this sport and in history? And if you don't have a title attached to your name, oftentimes you don't get mentioned in those conversations. In basketball, you think about Allen Iverson. You think of the big mound of rebound in Charles Barkley, one of the greatest players in the league for several years when he was there. Didn't win a championship. He doesn't come up in those conversations. You want to look at footballers, soccer players. Harry Kane never won a championship. He's not mentioned among some of the greats. He was great, but he never did it. You think of football. I mean, it being from Michigan, and I know we've mentioned the Michigan themes on our show here before. Barry Sanders never even sniffed a Super Bowl. One win in Detroit, one playoff win in Detroit. The greatest running back to ever live. And I don't think there's a conversation about that. You even want to extend that over to the coaching side. We saw, obviously, with March Madness, Michigan State get knocked out in the Elite Eight. For some reason, there's this storyline. You see the sweatshirt, you see the helmet behind me, you see this storyline and this dumbed-down revisionist history. And I think a lot of it is the younger generation talking about, episode 57, not 77. I'm about 20 off. Olin Kreutz. Goodness gracious. I'm off to a hot start. So I'm actually 20 episodes early on that one. Anyways, you are judged based off of championships. You are judged and you are looked at differently based off of if you win the big one. And if you've only won one in a stretch of time, or if you've only done this, that, or the other thing, people are going to look at your legacy differently. That's just the way we look at it. Is it right? No. I think it takes a little bit of deeper thinking. I think it takes paying attention to context clues to understand why that isn't correct. But that's the world that we live in. If you don't win the big one, you aren't regarded as one of the best. And I also think that it gives rise to the truth that if you do win the big one, that's really hard to do. To win it consistently and to be at that level consistently is the hardest thing to do in sports. So coming up here on episode 57 of Inside the Game podcast, we're actually going to talk to someone who's involved. You talk about inside the game. Sports information will take you inside the game. Sports information directors are there every day working with those athletes, being in those rooms, hearing those conversations, seeing the recruiting process. So they have a true feel on the pulse of what it takes to not only get there, but win that. And we're going to talk to the sports information director at Bethel University, Luke Schrock, who has seen those pilots. The pilots at Bethel U down in South Bend, Indiana, not too far from Notre Dame, and talk about them going on to win a national championship. And not only that, really building a reputation of being a team that goes back consistently. Made it back to the final site this past year. I got the opportunity to call the game that actually sent them there against Indiana Tech. That was special. And then coming up next week, we're also going to bring on Thiago dos Santos, Brazilian footballer who actually plays for Bethel, to talk about his experience coming over from the other side, not in the United States. Right, so we're trying to cover all of our bases here on Inside the Game. So he's coming up in a little bit. I want to start off with U.S. Open Cup results, though. I think I won? Question mark. I know we posted our round 2 picks the other day, but I did pretty well. Portland Hearts of Pine beat Hartford Athletic in penalty kicks 4-2. That was something that I actually got wrong. One thing I will say about day 2, though, yesterday, goodness gracious, the amount of red cards. We had some physical matchups. Loudoun United FC beats Virginia Dream 4-2. I picked Virginia Dream in that one. Won Knoxville SC 3-1 over Greenville Triumph FC. Both sides had 10 players to finish that game. One Knoxville was able to pull it out, though. Great offensive pressure in that one. Got to catch a little bit of that one. Chattanooga Red Wolves against Chattanooga SC. Penalty kicks in that game. The battle for Chattanooga. How else would you want it? 5-4 in penalties. Red Wolves end up taking the win. I ended up getting that one right. We talked about the battle for bragging rights in Chattanooga. The Red Wolves were able to pull it out, and again, the most exciting way possible. What a ball game. I know we previewed that one on our show. Westchester SC 3-2 over NY Freedoms. FC Naples 3-0 over Little Rock Rangers. Picked Little Rock Rangers. Again, the little guys did not get it done. The part-timers, if you will. Forward Madison FC against FC Tulsa. FC Tulsa 3-1. Des Moines Menace and Union Omaha was one of the more physical games I've ever seen played. 2-1 Union Omaha pulled it out. Pair of red cards in that one. Tacoma Defiance 2-1. They beat Spokane Velocity. Then LA Galaxy 2. Kind of fell flat on their face. 3-0 El Paso Locomotive FC, 3-0 shutout in that one. We will talk more in length about the U.S. Open results and what we liked about that tournament coming up tomorrow. Jonathan Turner actually hopping on in the conversation. What's up, JT? I think he's on the plane to nowhere. What's up? So I think he's actually viewing on the plane to San Diego right now. Watching from Delta Airlines. Oh, he's bougie. He's bougie like that. Okay. He's not on the big the flying mustard bottle. I see Luke Schrock laughing in the background. That's the Spirit Airlines is the way to go. Hey, cheap flight, they get you there in one piece. Okay, I don't care if I just want to get there in one solid piece. And most times I have. The other time I went American. That felt pretty special. But as circling back to what I was talking about earlier, again, championships are the standard. Okay, if you win championships, you're regarded as one of the best in this NAIA school. Again, little old Bethel University in South Bend is making waves in that regard. Right, first championship for that school since the turn of the century. They've really made their mark in the soccer sphere. And with that, we're going to bring on the man himself, best friend, someone who actually used to broadcast with me back in college and is now running the show down at Bethel. And again, kind of understands what it's like to be at that next level and really see what goes into that. It's my man, Luke Schrock. What's up, dude? Welcome on.
Hey, thanks for having me. And Southwest is actually the ultimate airline. I'm flying with them, going down to the tennis championship for the NAIA. So that's me. That's me. But I'm sure Delta is just as good. And I've done United as well and American. So it just
That's fair. I feel like I've touched all my base, mostly because I'm not the one paying for it. So at the end of the day, if someone offers me a good rate, it's like, okay, yeah, I don't care. Yeah, it's the first time I actually flew. I went down to Texas for a job interview, and I still remember them, Texas A&M International. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me mentioning this, but they're like, what's your preferred airliner? And I'm on the phone, and I'm like, I had flown once in my life leading up to that point. I've still only flown twice in my life in general, which is just bizarre to some people because I swear some people fly 3, 4, 5 times a year. Yeah, you including yourself, and that's the world of SID. But I'm like, I don't know. I'm not ready to shoot back. I'm like, Spirit, I guess. I don't know, just get me on something that flies and will get me there in a general short amount of time. That's all I'm aiming for.
Spirit or Frontier at this point. I hear both of them get you there safely. So.
And whatever works. So let's get into this a little bit. Obviously, you and I talk a lot every day. We game on Fortnite together. We're pretty close, and so we have a good pulse on what's going on. And I come down there in a lot, and I do play-by-play for you guys. But I'll be the first to admit, Luke, and I said this, in private conversations before. The the truth is as a play-by-play broadcaster, I'm pretty plugged into what's going on in the sports world. I see what's happening in and around programs, but I'm not as in the weeds. And I got to a point in my career, especially early on, because we talk about, the money isn't great. And I'm not saying that it's amazing in the SID world at all, but there's not a whole lot of assurances when you talk about being an independent contractor. You know that too, because you do IC work as well with your umpiring, with your other stuff that you do. There's not a lot of guarantees. One of them, the biggest one, is insurance. And that's the thing that has given my parents heart attacks for years and years. And it's why they got on me so early about, hey, when are you going to lock up that big time job? When are you going to lock up that full-time 9-to-5 benefits, all that stuff? The truth is I'm like, early on, I'm like, I don't really need it at the moment. Then you get further in. So I started looking into SID work because I thought that would be more assurances, more things like that. And so, like that interview down in Texas, a couple of other interviews talking to some neighboring schools, and all of it really came back to, it's not just about one element or the next. You got to balance all of it, right? You have to manage players. You have to manage where they're going, when they're going, logistics when it comes to traveling to tournaments and everything like that. And to do it at a small school is tough. But you really have a pulse on what feels like everything going on inside of that athletic department. Just talk about, first of all, we talk about inside the game a lot on this podcast. What exactly does your job entail as someone that's in the area of SID work?
Well, it's all over the place. I mean, it involves social media. It involves taking care of the entire athletic website. And that's for all of our 28 teams, including reserve teams, which that's something you find more at the small college level, sometimes the Division II, a lot of times Division III, NAI, those kind of levels. But on top of that, there's a lot of the administrative stuff. Like I'm putting together the NAI Swim and Dive Championship. I'm helping put together the NAI first and second round that'll be hosted on site. So if you're familiar with like March Madness, then they tend to start on campuses and then they go to neutral sites once you get down to the Final Four, I believe the Elite Eight, and especially the National Championship, which is similar to where like the NAI men's soccer and women's soccer national tournaments. They'll start at host sites. It used to be pods of 4 and sometimes 3. From what I understand, that was a year before my time. They switched to pods of 3 or 2 when I came along. And this last year, it was only pods of 3. And then whoever makes it out of those pods will go to the national championship. But putting together some of those kind of events, staffing the home games, every single home game, whether that's national tournament, regular home game, it doesn't matter. Having all the staff there at the table, the press box. So that includes the PA, which a lot of times I will just do myself because I have the experience on a mic. I know what I'm doing. And a lot of times for like soccer, you don't have a ton of in-game PA. You can, but we normally will do a introduction and then just let it kind of breathe. And I'll run the music for like home goals. Or in a neutral site case where you're hosting NAI first, second round is for both teams, or maybe not at all. Depends how you're staffed. But it's a myriad of things. I can work hand in hand with the university side marketing department. Like right now, we're kind of working on a proposal to have a mutual student worker that will have video. They'll shoot video for us and we can cut into content. Or if those people, or if we have enough people on that deal, then they can create content all the time for us on a regular set schedule that we set. So if you name it, we probably are in charge of it. And it's me and a grad assistant. Some schools will have 2 or 3 grad assistants, some a grad assistant, a full-time assistant. It just depends on the financial situation of that institution and what the athletic director wants to put in place. But we take care of a lot, and there's not a lot of people know that.
Yep. Well, and the benefit of all of it too is it gets to take you places. And early on, I know in your career and following what you've been doing over there, obviously, especially since you transitioned over from the news business and media over into what you're doing as an SID. Not that you don't deal with media. Obviously, it's in a different way, but you really get the opportunity sometimes to go places, but it takes those teams, at least later in seasons, I'm not talking about spring training and all that other stuff, but sometimes it takes those teams getting to a place to where they're succeeding enough to where they can go out and compete in national championships and tournaments. And every school has their sport. You look across the board, every school has their sport. Everyone has their one thing that they hang their hat on. There are exceptions. There's the Indiana Wesleyans of the world that are a little bit, they tend to do well at everything. They tend to do well at everything. And there are other schools like that. But then there are a lot of schools that have their sport that is their claim to fame. And I know Bethel's been doing really well at a lot of different things, but the one thing that you can say, in people in soccer spheres, they all say the same stuff. Soccer is really the thing that Bethel is known for. And I mention it in soccer circles. And I was even talking to someone who works in professional baseball, used to play at Aquinas College yesterday. I mentioned Bethel, and his first thing was like, oh, like you call games for them? Like they're the real deal. So you've seen what it's like for that team to get to that level, and you've had the opportunity to wear a ring. I talked about winning a championship, just even having the ring. Oh, is it somewhere in the room? Oh, there you go.
It has
Pull
been
her
in the
out.
past. Oh gosh, is it? It was at some point. I don't know if I put it in my backpack or something, but I had a couple monitors I just put in. So I should have it somewhere.
Well, you keep looking, but it's really tough to get there. And I talked about it, winning consistently enough to actually get your team into a final destination like Kansas and what they did last year. Now, obviously, they didn't win it. Oh, there it is.
There it
Look
is.
at that thing. So that's shiny. That's gotta weigh you down a little bit. But that was an early
hefty.
experience. That was an early experience for you, though. But they've found a way to continually get back to that site, continually garner top 10, top 5 selections. The recruiting has gotten a lot better. You have a pulse on all that. How have they been able to win so consistently? And not just win on the field, but also win in the recruiting room and win in the coaching department too.
Well, it's interesting because it's a highly international roster at the NEI level and really at a lot of levels. International rosters from all over the place is very common. I mean, our NEI Player of the Year in 2022, Tim Noding, he is from Germany. He's now just transferred out he's going to be playing for Syracuse this next season. So I'm so proud of that guy. He's an awesome guy. Awesome player, awesome off the field, awesome in his faith as well. But he's from Germany. We have a slew of Brazilians. We've had people from Japan. It's just all over the place, and there's all sorts of different playing styles. And what helps is head coach Tiago Pinto, when he took over the program, they didn't have this kind of success. Any kind of new coach, it normally takes about that 3 to 4 year period where they can get their own people in to start seeing the fruition of how that coach is. Sure, you can coach the people that you have right now into what potential you have, but it takes time to get your processes and everything in place. But come 2021, the year before I came on campus to Bethel, I've been there for about 3 years. This is actually my 3rd year. They made it to the NEI first, second round, and they didn't get out of that round. Q to 2022, their national championship year, they not only made it out of the first, second round, and we hosted it, but they made it all the way. And that team that year, everything just looked smooth. Everything looked just perfect. Now, granted, there was some times that they kind of grinded out that 1-0 win, but everything they did, the passing, the scoring, the back lines, defenses, like our keeper, Finn Popescu from, I want to say Germany as well, but ended up moving to Athens, Greece. He only saw the ball maybe, he had like 7-8 saves on the season going into the national tournament. This is regular season. conference and non-conference. This isn't the
Right.
national tournament. He saw a lot more in the national tournament, but he was so well coached by keepers coach Ver Gingrich, who's still with the program now. But you also had Mamba Gisoni, who's now the head coach at the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He is a former MLS player, along with Steve Hertzman, as you know, you've probably talked about on this show out of Grand Rapids. Mamba Gisoni, a good friend of Steve Hertzman's, he was a part of that coaching staff as well. I believe he was an assistant, maybe an associate head coach. I don't remember off the top of my head. But when you have a coaching staff that knows what they're doing, knows how to implement what they're doing, and work well together, then my goodness, you're going to have some good things happen. And with a similar coaching staff, now having Raimundo Gonzalez from Mexico in that associate head coach role, he hit the ground running with everything. And now they're continuously making those national tournament runs, and they just keep reloading. They're getting these transfers, JUCO transfers, D1 transfers, one of which came from Gardner Webb. Well, that was stop 2 of 4, with Bethel being number 4, but West Virginia Tech being one of those stops in the NEI. So the guy was familiar with the NEI landscape before going to NCAA Division I Gardner Webb, and then coming to Bethel. So and joining that back line. So it's a mixture of just getting your quality players, knowing how to coach them, especially when they come from different cultures. And that's just in the relational aspect, not even just the football aspect. That's a whole different thing. When you can mesh that all together, my goodness, you're going to do some great things.
And that's the part about this conversation. And we were talking to Victoria Quay yesterday, a great conversation, but she mentioned how her college coach, and Jonathan Turner actually put a really good comment on here talking about the financial side. And we'll dive into that here in a second. But I do want to talk about managing all the different personalities from all the different parts of the world, but also coaching style too. Because the one thing Victoria talked about, and I don't know who this coach is. I'm not going to name drop. I'm not in the business of doing that. But she went to Cal State Northridge to play, and she talked in very black and white terms about how the coaching style, and it is really easy for a coach to ruin the love of the sport for someone if their style of going about, their work or what they do is confrontational. If it's not open, if it's not empathetic at times, that you've been through that, you've seen it. Not to say you've had any coaches that are really bad in that way, but it's true. And I've seen it ruin the experience for people in college athletics before because they just don't know how to manage all those personalities, let alone having them from all parts of the world. And I've known that and I've seen it. But the one thing that I think Tiago Pinto has a really good pulse on is his coaching style and the way he goes about his business and the way he deals with his players. And it makes them want to go out and compete really hard for him. And we talk about identity and where you're from. And oftentimes, soccer is really the international language. The sport itself is its own language. Yeah, you have, English and Spanish and everything else like that. But it's almost like watching Northwestern Ohio back in the day. They would get kids from each and every single corner of the earth. You would hear them coming off the bus speaking 17 different languages, and then they would beat you 5-0. They would still find a way to do it. And the one thing Tiago Pinto has done is taken all these different personalities from all these different parts of the world, all these different styles of playing the game, and yet he's still able to go out and retain players. That's the important thing here. Retain players and win championships. That is a tough thing to do. What is it about his coaching style? We'll get into recruiting. We'll get into money here in a second. What is it about his coaching style to where he can take players from all over the world and still go out and get those results?
Well, you got to keep in mind too, is a lot of international countries use English. So they're learning English as they're growing up. Right. So you do hear the Germans talking German with each other, the Brazilians talking Portuguese to each other, and then Spanish as well. So when they're on the pitch and you have a whole back line of nothing but Brazilians, they're going to talk Portuguese to each other. Right. But when your keeper is talking English, they're going to be able to pick up right away, like, okay, and mix the two languages. But getting to the coaching style is Thiago knows, like, goodness, 3-4 languages. So he can speak to guys in their native tongue. Now, I don't think he has German to his repertoire yet, but I mean, who knows with his personality? Give it like 5 years. He might be speaking German in the hallway. And I'm like, Thiago, when did this happen? But, but he knows the native tongue. So it's not like there is a communication gap whatsoever, but that's also in a part of the recruiting process. Like, hey, if I can't understand you, am I going to recruit you? But if I can't understand you, we're not going to get that far anyways. So, but the coaching, like he is a person that can get to a relational level with guys, and he knows how to have fun, but also get down to business. And that fits perfectly into the German personality style, getting down to business, but can still have a little fun, maybe a little bit of dry humor, but it's just getting the group of guys that mesh together. They do everything together. And a lot of times they end up working with me on my staff. You mentioned Thiago dos Santos, one of the best student photographers I've ever had. Definitely one of 3, I would say. But along with Matis Nijas, one of the keepers now for the Pilots, who is so you got Brazilian and German right there. So that's 2 different things. But for Thiago, like he just knows how to get guys to rally behind and buy into what they're doing, because now they can say, hey, 22, this worked. 23, this worked. What can we do similar that we were doing then and bring it into now? What changes do we need to make? What adjustments are other teams making to what we're doing and what we're changing? So they'll see their tough games and they'll travel to Atlanta for a tournament that has top teams that are going to the national tournament every year. And they are going to battle test themselves because they're at the level to do so. And it'd be actually beneficial. So they're throwing themselves to the fire, and pretty early on. They'll have a non-conference against Holy Cross, which is the neighbors that is under the blanket of Notre Dame, along with St. Mary's. But they'll play Holy Cross as a first game of the year. Don't have to travel that far. They come across the way to our place, and that'll be test number 1. Then they'll have one more non-conference, and then they'll go to an Atlanta to be truly battle tested by your University of Mobiles, your Kaisers, your St. Thomas, on and on and on. So the mix of that relational success translates onto the pitch. So you have the mixture of both of those, and that's what Thiago Pinto does really well.
I wanted to get this in very quickly. The Coffee Firm, I always want to give them a shout because they're one of our loyal listeners. Did I watch the Battle of Chattanooga? It was a great game, over 12K. I did watch a little bit of it. Goodness gracious, we got to talk about that coming up tomorrow. I know JT is going to be back on the show, probably on a beach somewhere, to be completely honest with you. So lucky him. We will chat about that tomorrow. But back on what we were talking about, that's the amazing part to me. And the other thing is that even in the United States, and this was something that Thiago dos Santos, you were just mentioning him, Brazilian footballer, now playing for Bethel, I think into his final year. I think as they begin to ramp up, playing some scrimmages here in the spring and whatnot. So he talked about that, the importance of realizing that there is a lot of soccer talent across the different levels in the college sphere. A lot of it is because recruiting, when they go over to these different countries, a lot of times, these kids will get offers from schools in the United States, and they don't necessarily understand the structure of it all. They don't have the same mentality as American kids. Oh, I either go D1 or it's bust. All the different levels, they see it as an opportunity to come over to the United States and play the game, but it also forces you to get crafty with your recruiting. right? Because this is where I want to kind of show the one comment from JT. It is a battle for finances at small schools and creative ways to not only stretch the dollar, but you talk about attracting good talent to your school. And a lot of times that comes with having to go overseas. That comes with having to go to those places to find those kids. How has he been able to recruit so efficiently and stretch that dollar in order to get the most out of the product?
Well, you know what's interesting, and after talking with a lot of these coaches that recruit overseas, there's not a lot of trips overseas. There is recruiting, I don't know if I want to call them platforms or programs, but it's predominantly done online. And that's talking with people even outside of Bethel. They're not hopping on a United Airlines flight or whatever Jonathan is on right now, Delta, and flying overseas to go talk to these kids. It is it is video chats. It's texting and calls and a lot of those kind of things. And it's more or less digital communication. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating because, you know, you look at the Unos of the world, the Aquinas, the Bethels, the Kaisers, Southeastern, and they have these full international rosters. You'll still have some Americans, but they're not doing it the same way as when you recruit a domestic player, if you will. So in the terms of like stretching the dollar, that's one of them. You might be paying for one of those programs, but at the same time, you have your set scholarship dollars that you use, and you got to balance like who's going to get what. How much do I have left over to go get this guy versus this guy? But you find some of these people from Division I transfers. I mentioned Mickey Fujita. I didn't mention by name, but Mickey Fujita is his name that came from Gardner Webb. Tim Noting. I don't remember. I think he found him through the program that I was mentioning, but you find a lot of these guys from JUCO transfers, but these guys have friends that are from Brazil, from Germany, from Japan, and they talk. One might be at West Virginia Tech. One might be at Bethel. One's winning a championship at Bethel. The West Virginia Tech may not have that much success. I don't know too much about their program, but they talk and they're like, hey, come over here. Why not join us and let's run this back again? Let's get the gang back together, if you will. So, and that's what happened at Cornerstone Baseball when I was playing there is you had some local guys down in Edwardsburg, Michigan, and they had JUCO friends. They're like, hey, we're looking for our 4-year institution. Why don't you come here and let's give the WAC a run for its money? And it's those kind of conversations that bring some people in. And sometimes that's better than you're recruiting overseas because they did their training overseas, come to the United States, they get to know how things run in the United States, and then they find their final destination. And here we are at Bethel and going back to the NEI National Tournament for the 5th, 6th, however many years.
Right. Well, the other thing too, and it's a big component of the NAI life, and that's the difficult thing, for me, and at least like for you too, is you always want more, but you realize on the back end of that, it takes a lot to raise a lot, and so that's the hard part. Is that in order to do all these things, you have to be able to financially support them, and so it's not an easy task to do. It is really hard. Does he have his hand in that at all?
Well, there's different fundraising for different things. You have fundraising for athletic department things, for equipment at fields, maybe field renovations, but then each team does their own fundraising, and that looks different ways. The athletic department gives them a method of fundraising, but if you know Tiago Pinto at all, I mean, you could mistake him for a government official just in the way he holds himself,
Yeah.
because he knows everybody. You know, we go to Decatur, Alabama for the national championship in 22.
I do think he is CIA. I actually think he is CIA. But anyways, go ahead.
Some sort of affiliation. But I mean, the man seems like a politician. Like, my goodness.
Right.
We go down to Decatur, Alabama. We make our stop at the hotel in, say, Chattanooga. Right. We get off the bus. First thing you see is Tiago going, "Hey, so-and-so." And he knows everybody at every stop. It's incredible. Yep. And
so you're kind of like a hybrid salesman at that degree when you talk about selling the stuff.
Yeah, selling your program to players, selling your program to donors, and especially at the private college level, even the public college level, it's probably the same way, where you're trying to not convince, I would say, you're really trying to sell the culture of your program to the people that matters to them in the aspects of the culture that you're trying to create. And a lot of it is Christian donors, right? We're a private Christian institution that is affiliated with the missionary church. And a lot of our donor base, or I should say some of it, is through people that is either going to church with Tiago or is affiliated one way or another. But at the same time, it's people that love soccer, love Bethel soccer. So you have your alumni donor base. You have corporate donor bases. It just all depends on who you know and who you get to know on any of your travels. He does a lot with the NEI national office. So he knows people at the NEI national office, and those opportunities allow him to talk with people. And that's the more you talk to people, the more you're going to find people in a donor base. And that is what a lot of the funding that comes to the program. So they can travel to Atlanta for a big tournament. So they can go to the NEI national tournament or the NCCAA national tournament, which Bethel is also affiliated with, the National Christian College Athletic Association. So we're in a dual affiliated league, but also play in the Crossroads League at the NEI level.
The other part of this too is when you sell yourself or when you sell a product, the one thing we always want is ROI. We all want return on investment. Coaches are the same exact way. And we've entered into this sphere in college athletics now to where ROI is a tricky subject because you can get a player and have them for a year and have them do really well, but then they're gone. Right? Transfer portal has changed everything about the way we look at college athletics because the option has always been there for coaches to just, hey, I want a new opportunity. I'm gone overnight. No penalty, no anything whatsoever. And so now we're getting to this point now to where athletes are like that now too. And you've seen it. You've seen the news with the transfer portal specifically, mostly college basketball is the stuff that I've been getting, and football and everything else like that. But that stretches across college athletics. And it has everything to do with NIL. It has everything to do with the fact that you don't lose opportunities if you transfer now. It used to be you had to sit out for a certain amount of time. That's not the case. And they always say, depending.
That's if you transfer within your conference. If you transfer out of your conference, this is the NAI. Don't quote me, NCAA.
Right.
But that out of conference, out of conference. That's when you don't have to sit out a year.
Okay. So that's fair. Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Filter, sorry.
But no, you're good. But the one thing I'll say is when you talk about bringing in a lot of international students, and I've had individual conversations with these kids when I've been down there, like all of them, it is amazing to me. Perspective is the one thing that'll give you an idea as to how good you actually have it. And when I talk to these kids, I always ask them, I'm like, do you plan on going home? Do you plan on returning to Italy or Brazil or Portugal or any of these places when you graduate? Are you going to go back there? They're like, no. Like, why would I? I miss my family. Don't get me wrong. Like, I wish they were here. I wish they were around me. But I came to this place to where, back there, whatever your family's doing, you kind of do the same thing, right? If your dad's a plumber, you'll probably be a plumber. If your dad's doing this, you'll probably do that. Now that's I'm not painting the entire world with a broad stroke here, but that's just to say that there's not necessarily unlimited opportunities everywhere you go. And so when they come to the United States, they're amazed by just how plentiful everything is around them. And when you talk about a program that wins championships consistently in the game of soccer at the NAI level, you talk about spotlighting individual athletes that might lead to opportunities to go out and do other things with other teams, which then factors in transfer portal, which then factors in everything else like that. That's the hardest part about being successful on that level is you feel like you have that feeling like someone is coming up behind you in order to, hit you over the head to take your best pieces to your team and then take them away. And I imagine that's really tempting for these kids that come over from different places that see those opportunities like present themselves. How has he dealt with the new culture of college athletics? And really, it's not just recruiting, it's two-pronged, right? You're going and find players at other schools and you're telling them to come here. That seems like a whole added job on top of what you're already doing on the recruiting trail, doing what you're doing with coaching. How has he managed and balanced? And we've had a lot of transfer portal conversations on here before. How does he manage and balance all of that?
Well, you also got to keep in mind, in the sense of talking to players and other teams, you're not supposed to do so until they've entered the portal. So that's the first thing. So that kind of takes it out of the equation. Now, you do have the players that you play against, and you're like, oh gosh, I got to keep an eye on Nate Wengler, number 17 for Indiana Tech, because he's going to give us some issues on the front line and striking. You're going to have those, but it's more or less in the sense of who knows who and who is going to fit into your program, because not every great player is going to fit into your culture very well or get along with your players. So a lot of times what you see is when on recruit trips, you have players that will hang out with them, show them the campus, show them the campus life. That is if they're already in the States. Now, you don't see that or at least as much when they're coming from overseas. Like we were talking about earlier, I mean, there's not a lot of in-person interactions. There can be, but it's case-by-case basis. But I do have players, like I mentioned Finn Popescu earlier. He went back to Germany and he actually joined and I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is, but it sounds like a collegiate inter-school league in Athens, Greece, which was very interesting because it looked like they all went to this one school, but they all split themselves. It was a bigger school. They split themselves into like 6 or 7 teams, and they would just play each other in a league, which was very interesting. So you do have some internationals that will go home, but it's, once again, case-by-case basis. I know one of the grad assistants under Tiago Pinto went back to Brazil. Actually, I think both of them went back to Brazil to start their coaching, or their goalkeeper coaching company, which it seems to be doing fairly well from what I'm seeing. So I'm very happy for the both of them. But in the sense of like balancing the new stage of college athletics, NIL hasn't fully trickled down to the NAI yet. It has in men's basketball and your major sports like that. But at least from the conversations that I've had, I haven't seen it trickle down to your men's and women's soccers. That's still in that recruiting process. Players are looking at, what are your facilities like? What's your coaching style? What is your team structure? Your formation that you run, and at what times, and how you deal with the day to day.
Right.
You don't see as much of like, hey, I'll only come to your school if you give me $500,000. That's still very much college football at Division I level.
Right.
That has
Right.
not trickled down yet. But
Yeah.
but you're right.
Telling me you don't have a
grand
spare
scheme-
500K laying around somewhere?
No, we don't have an
You don't
envelope
have
on my desk ready to go at any
Okay.
point.
All right.
We haven't gotten to that level yet. And if
Like,
they
I want a piece
have,
of that.
I mean that 500 grand may make it to my house somehow.
Might
How
disappear.
it floated
Disappear.
there. I did put it in my car. It floated there.
It grew legs and walked.
We had 2 straight line wind storms coming through. Anything could have
Yep.
happened.
It's crazy stuff, man. Anyways.
when I roll up in a Lamborghini, mind your business.
Yeah. All right. I won't ask any questions.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, it's slowly beginning to trickle down. Anything that happens at the NCAA level begins to trickle down. The rule book for soccer, for baseball, for whatever the sport may be, it trickles down. Take the pitch clock for baseball, for example. That just hit this year. So so the base rule book for NEI is the NCAA, and if the NEI national office determines, or the committees for each sport determine to make a adjustment here and there, then they'll make a motion for it. But it's a trickle down effect. So if it's not fully there now, it will be in X amount of years.
Right. Yeah, and the hardest part about it, I imagine, and I know we don't have a ton of time left with you, but I think I can fit a few more questions in here. By the way, Willem, very quickly, Bethel, Indiana. So it's in Indiana. I know there's a couple of Bethels out there, but this is South Bend, Indiana, national champion. Again, their only national championship since, at least in the NAI, since the turn of the century in 2000. So soccer is really kind of their thing. So that's why I thought this would be a good conversation, because like I said, Luke has a real good pulse on that. I want to talk about this specifically because JT and I have gone off on the U.S. men's national team a couple of times because, and I know that you've seen these videos and you've liked some of these videos, because they lack an identity. And a lot of it is, when you talk about putting together so many high-level, extremely competitive, talented players, if they don't have that common thread, that common identity, and it's why we maybe not necessarily took issue to the fact that they passed over a few Americans to coach that team, but it was interesting because don't you think an American might be better to be in that spot to kind of spur on these guys who are representing America? I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but identity seems like it's lacking. And you can have all the talent in the world, you can have all the best individual pieces, and all actually revert to a quote that I heard once. If you've ever watched anybody on here, Last Chance U, it's the different football. It's the American football. One of the coaches on there said, and it's one of the greatest quotes ever, and you can track it anywhere you go, 5 stars will get you beat. Right? The big, talented, big ego athletes, if you put them all together in a room, they will get you beat. Because they don't know how to play together. They carry themselves a certain way. There's no identity. It doesn't matter how fit you are. It doesn't matter how talented you are. They will not win games consistently. So the hardest thing for a coach is identity, fostering an identity, because that will carry you. The emotional component will carry you just as far as the tactical and everything else like that. And it seemed like the U.S. men's national team used to have an identity. When Bruce Arena was there, they won some big games. They were, they beat Mexico consistently. They did all these things. Now it's like Mauricio Pochettino is like scrambling. He's scrambling to try to form an identity before the Gold Cup. He's scrambling to try to form an identity before we get to the World Cup in the U.S. Just saw the news that the women's team will be hosting it in 2031. That's exciting. It looks like they will be hosting it in 2031. Either way, identity is a tough thing to do, and it's a tough thing to develop, especially when you talk about getting new players in all the time. How does he go about forming an identity, especially when he has so many different various players? Because the one thing I could say about you guys, at least from just watching you and being there, is you have a set identity. The way you play, the way you carry yourself, the processes that you go through, it's all there. It's like a well-oiled machine. Does he preach about identity a lot? Because I feel like that's one of the better components about his coaching career and what he's been able to accomplish in the NAI.
Well, yes, but first and foremost, all these guys. Well, hey, before I say anything, the expectations are laid out at the very, very, very beginning. When the recruiting process starts, the expectations are laid out. And while everyone's getting to know each other as best as they can in a recruiting setting or recruitment setting, the other aspect is, once again, we're a private Christian institution. So the identity begins in the rooted faith in Jesus Christ. That's the very first thing. But outside of that, once you get into the program, then you're looking at, okay, yeah, these are the institution's rules and what the expectations are on the university side as representing ourselves and our families and everyone we know as Christians, but also representing the team, the head coach, yourself, your own family, and the institution. So everything is laid out at the very beginning, and then they go, this is our offer. Do you accept? That's where it begins. And that's where it should begin. But then once they get on campus, it's reiterated. Like, hey, this is our expectations for the season. This is what we're going to do this year. Are you on board? And here we go. Everything, any good, well-oiled machine has their expectations and their processes nailed down at the very beginning, and then you start to refine. And if things start to begin lacking, then you go, okay, hold on. You address the issue, bring it back to where you need it to be, and then keep riding the train down the campaign trail. That's how a well-oiled machine operates.
And I guess the other side of that is, have you seen not the negative, but have you seen maybe individuals not get left behind, but maybe not get put in prime spots or get left on the recruiting trail or left on the chopping block because they don't abide by those guidelines? I mean, is Tiago Pinto pretty hardlined about what his expectations are? Because I imagine it's important to set that up front, but it is a constant conversation at the same exact time too. Culture doesn't stop with one talk at the beginning of the year. Have you seen that other side?
I see. That's the parts that I don't typically see. Yeah. The parts that I see, and a lot of this context is just from me having conversations. So I don't see everything that happens in the recruiting, despite the numerous recruiting emails thinking that I'm a coach, even though I clearly says support staff on the roster. But
right.
What I'll do is and I think this is actually a perfect route to go into is my email, and a lot of them are soccer players. I get soccer, baseball, basketball, sometimes lacrosse, women's lacrosse. And I get kids that email me that, hey, this is my recruiting video. I'm a 6'3" forward, blah, 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 blah. And I have to tell them hey, I'm not actually a coach. I deal with everything except what you're trying to do. So and I will revert them to our recruitment form on our website. So there's different means of getting a coach's attention, but especially with a very high profile, is that the word for it? High profile or a
winning pedigree.
Team. A winning pedigree. Yeah. Plug in the adjective. A lot of the recruitment that happens is the coaches discovering players. It's not like how I got recruited, where I'm emailing coaches like these kids are, and I sympathize with them. Now I get busy enough and I can't really kind of help them out a little bit. I'm like, hey, fill out the form, then start reaching out to the coach, because that's normally the best method if you don't have the public numbers to get recognized. Then that's normally the best means of getting recruited. But still, I don't see the guys that get crossed off the list. So I don't see that part. I start seeing them once they sign. So I gather their information. I have a little bio form where they can fill out their stuff, because a lot of internationals don't have a max prep page. that I can go to and get, okay, he had 17 goals his senior season, career 34, averaged however many saves or whatever. I don't have those numbers actively in front of me. And sometimes they don't even have those numbers at all. So I'll just gather information like, I went to this school. I played this club, went to this club championship in this country. And that's how I can formulate a bio for them. So that's where I pick up on the process and gathering information and getting their roster bio filled out. And what I'll do is, instead of a signing article, I thought the more efficient way of doing it is in my preseason article. Like if I look into the season for that team, I'll include a section of all the newcomers, whether that's transfers or high school freshmen that are coming to campus, to a college campus for the first time. And I'll do it that way. And that's when I pick up on the process. And then when I start making my pronunciation guides, getting the rosters on the website, on and on, that's when I start to get to know them on a piece of paper. But then once I start getting to games and they come by and shake my hand, because that a lot of the internationals, like when they get to the game and they walk by and they see me in the press box, they walk over and shake my hand because that is a part of their culture, and especially for the Brazilian culture and the Hispanic culture as well. So they will come, and I'll get the Germans to come over too. They'll make their way over eventually. Normally it's right before they warm up, but they will come eventually. But yeah, so that's when I start to have those one-on-one interactions, or when I travel with them and either to Atlanta or the NEI tournament, whatever the case may be. That's when I start to get those one-on-one interactions, or if they join my game management staff, which is what the staff name that I staff every home game. Then I get to have more interactions with them, or if they stop by my office eventually, because that doesn't happen right away. But if they get to know me, they're going to stop by my office and we can have more of those conversations. And that's when you get to know their actual culture, the differences of coming to the United States and American soccer versus Brazilian, German, Japanese. So that's kind of where I pick up and hit the ground running when it comes to the recruiting aspect.
So I know we're not normally hard-lined on time on this show. Sometimes we'll go a little bit over, sometimes we'll go a little bit under. So with that, I think I can fit in at least one more. Great conversation, by the way. Would love to have you back on at some point here. JT will be back on with me tomorrow, again, talking about the U.S. Open Cup and a couple of other things. Expect some more interviews coming up. Thiago Dos Santos, I want to get him on. Also, Steve Herdsman. I know I mentioned him the other day, played in the MLS, one of the fastest players in history. Was actually on FIFA once upon a time. I believe FIFA 2002, 2001?
2007.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay, he's not that old. To FIFA 2007. What was his speed? Like a 92 or something? Or
something ridiculous like that.
Nuts.
Something
but
like
he's the man. Played at Cornerstone, made it to the MLS, so it is possible. Like I said, the talent at all the different levels, it's there. You know, it's just like the cream rises to the top. They'll find you. But the last thing I'll ask you before I let you go, and like I said, I wish I had 2 hours because I could sit here and talk about it all day, because I really think the game of soccer is growing, not only on myself, but I think it's growing on you too. I think we're both kind of there. I didn't grow up with it. I didn't play it. I didn't really watch it all that much. It wasn't in my household. You're an Indiana kid, so basketball was your religion right up against, everything else. And so, but getting into it now, especially doing high-level soccer, is very entertaining. But the biggest issue that we're lacking here in the United States, I think, is keeping the best talent here in the States. That is the hardest part. Now, it could be regardless of level, because a lot of times when they go pro, they go elsewhere. They go to European countries. They go to these different places where maybe the support is a little bit more, fan support, other things, financially, whatever. Is there a push in your mind from anybody on this team, anybody on this coaching staff? Do you see them wanting to stick around the U.S. to play? Like, this is an attractive place to continue playing this game, or is there a sense of urgency for some of them to leave, or does it depend on situation? Are they trying to do that, trying to keep them around?
They're looking for whatever opportunity comes their way. And this is every single player that I have talked with. They're willing to stay in the States. They have no problem in staying in the States. But it depends on the opportunities they have, which Tiago Pinto coaches the Northern Indiana FC in the summers. which they just made the jump to USL2. I believe it is USL2. Yes, I believe so. But they have it right there, the comment, Goshen City FC, Fort Wayne FC. Yeah,
it's turning into a big thing.
And that is a professional league. So they see that opportunity, and Tiago goes, hey, Piero Sabroso, Bethel men's soccer player, come join this team. They bring in, they've got guys from Notre Dame, KK Bafor, they had on their team about a year or two ago. I don't know if he's still coming this year. I'm not sure. But they got guys from all over the top NAI talent, Huntington, Bethel, Holy Cross. There's a few more. I think it's like some D3 or 2 in there as well. But they got guys from all over the NAI and D1 landscape that come to play in this team, in this league. So those kind of professional leagues will possibly garner attention from the next level. So they're looking to just, what's their next step? What's their next level that they can play and that coaches will be interested in? So I don't want to say they don't care where they go, but they just want their opportunity. Exactly. It depends. They just want their next opportunity to continue to play the game. And that's any athlete, any sport. It's the same kind of mentality. If they can continue and their body lets them continue, they're going to. And they'll figure it out along the way.
Great conversation, buddy. I appreciate you stepping up to the plate here today. Again, JT will be back with us tomorrow talking about the U.S. Open Cup and everything else in regards to that. Again, we got some new Spotlight feature interviews coming up on the show. I know you're connected to Herds in one way or the other. I'd love to talk to Tiago Pinto if we ever have the chance to bring him on. I know he's a pretty entertaining personality. You guys got a bunch of them down there at Bethel University. But that's Luke Schrock. Give him a follow on social media. I'm assuming you're at Luke Schrock on a lot of the different platforms.
L Schrock 20 is the comment.
L Schrock 20, number 20.
Yes.
Okay. Also, follow, subscribe to the podcast. We will be back at it tomorrow at 9 a.m. But one last time, Schrock, again, I appreciate you coming on to chat about it. Come back on the show, man. Don't be a stranger. I'd love to talk about it. And obviously, once we get further into the season, once you guys start to ramp up, try to make another championship push, love to talk about how the team's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll come on any time. Just give me the word.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you having
me. Episode 58 coming up tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll talk to you guys then.
This has been a presentation of the National Soccer Network.